Hello, everyone. I am Michelle Lundstrom, and welcome to Therapist Supporting Therapists. Today, we have with us the beautiful Melinda Moats. She is a child and family counselor with over 23 years of experience. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we're so glad to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I started to do my counseling back when I turned about 30. It took me a while to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, but eventually I got it figured out. So I went to school and raised a couple of small kids and had a husband who worked out of town a lot. And so it's been a long road, but now my kids are all grown up and I've loved my private practice and I really enjoy all of that. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I know you're being humble because you also do a lot of workshops and coaching, and you have written an ebook called Parenting Day by Day.
Mm-hmm.
And you also teach online classes. And as we sit here on the front lines with our clients, many of us are parenting with kids at home, especially young children.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, what are some tips that you have for mental health professionals as we navigate life and our careers during a pandemic?
Yeah. It's really hard and nobody's been down this road yet. So we're all making it up as we go along. So I think one of the first things we can do is just be really forgiving of ourselves and say, hey, we're all trying to figure this out. So let's just take it slow and make the best decisions we know how to make and then move forward from there. And as I was saying earlier, when I was trying to go to get my master's degree and raise these two little kids, it's a juggling act. And sometimes you just have to let some things go. So maybe we're not going to vacuum, maybe we're not going to dust, and maybe there's a whole lot of things that we would normally be doing that we're just not going to do right now. And I think that's really okay. If something has to give, I think it's better to be that than, our kids or our work or whatever else. So prioritizing is really important.
And so prioritizing and giving ourselves a little bit of grace is
Yeah,
good while we're going through this.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the struggles that I've heard, I was talking to you a little about earlier before we started this recording, and therapists have been talking about that challenge with homeschooling, and I know many states parents are trying to work from home and homeschool and juggle that, and especially those with younger children. Do you have any tips for kind of navigating some of those anxieties and frustrations and challenges?
Yeah. Well, over the years of raising my kids went to private schools, public schools, and I homeschooled them actually for about 6 years. So one of the best things I learned is that homeschooling is not as structured, not nearly as structured as school is. I think a lot of people assume that you've got to sit down and work your way through that math workbook, and get to page 63 by a certain day. And you really don't. There's a lot of schooling that happens when you all bake cookies together, you learn fractions, you learn chemistry, and it all just happens naturally. So I think, in terms of the homeschooling, is just relax and have fun and try to think of ways that you can incorporate different topics all into one thing. So if your kids are interested in birds, well, you can draw birds and you can research birds and you can write a paper about birds. You can tell your mom about birds. You can find birds in the bird book. All of this is homeschooling. And so just have fun with it. I think it's the main thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that it also becomes difficult and a challenge for therapists to navigate than working while not having their children in school and having them home all day. And I know couples and families are really trying to balance out how to make time for work, make time for sessions and clients.
Mhm. Yeah, boy, tricky, right? I mean, it's very tricky. You're relying on your partner to help you out if you have one. If you don't have one, then you're really on your own to try to figure it out. And so I say, hey, I know there's a lot of things that we say about electronics and trying to eliminate our electronics in our kids' lives, but not today and not when you're trying to work. I think that it isn't going to ruin anybody's life if they do a little extra electronics while you're trying to get something done. So, we do the best we can to see who we can. We can't see everybody. And so, yes, we're going to have to turn some people away. And also, like I had an appointment last week with an eye doctor over the internet. Amazingly enough, they can do that.
Mhm.
And her 18-month-old started to cry in the background. And she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I know you can hear that." And I'm like, it's fine. It's not interrupting me. And so I think people are very forgiving, and we can remember that our clients understand that we're trying to fit them in the best way we can. We're trying to find a nice private place to be, but we can't necessarily guarantee that our 16-year-old isn't going to forget and open the door and go, "Where's the pizza?" And, so everybody understands that. So we just need to do the best we can, make the best decisions you know how to make.
Absolutely. There's a lot of humanizing of the medical field right now.
Yeah, right. We're all in this together.
Yeah. So a
Yeah.
really important question that I've been hearing a lot from therapists themselves and as they're trying to answer this question because clients are asking it, is how do we talk about the pandemic with our kids? Do you have any wisdom for us on this?
Yeah. I think about that, about the way I think about any adult topic that's difficult for a child to understand. So whether you're trying to explain sex or war or whatever it might be, I think the first rule of thumb is to only answer the questions that you've been asked. So if they are saying, "What's a pandemic?" You say, "Oh, it's a flu, and we're staying home so that we won't get run into it." "Oh, is it a problem?" "No, we're fine because we're home." And you just answer the questions very short, very sweet. Of course, it'll depend on how old your child is, what you think they can handle. And also, you got to think about your own kids. Some kids run a little more skittish, a little more scared. And so then you have to take into consideration what, the kinds of information you want to give. If they're, you think they're able to take more information, you can give them more. But I still wouldn't answer any more than they, said, any more
I
than they
love
had.
that. And you're an example, you were so calm too. And I think one of the things is our children can feed off of our anxiety.
Hmm. Yeah. And one of the other things I would say is to keep a good environment. So that means not having the TV on, definitely not having the news on, I guess is what I mean there. And
Mm.
not having it on the radio and not talking on the phone about it with your friends and family. Because you may think they're down the hall in the other room and they're not hearing a word you're saying. They might be hearing every word you're saying. So you want to get your news by reading, getting on the internet, reading your newspaper, because they can't hear that. So you get to be informed, but then they're not listening to all that, upset on the news, how they like to do that.
Protect them from that.
So create an environment where they're not hearing about it.
Yes. And I always like what Mr. Rogers says, if they do get anxious, have them look for the helpers.
And talk about the helpers and go, "Oh, isn't it wonderful? Look at all these nurses and doctors and scientists. They're figuring it out. They're working hard. Isn't that great? Aren't we lucky? We live in such a
Mhm.
great place."
Yeah, it really helps manage the anxiety children might have.
Yeah, right.
So I'm curious what you've learned about yourself in this process of going through a global pandemic as a healer and also
Mhm.
trying to balance being a human being that's impacted by this.
Yeah. Well, I think I learned a lot of the lessons that a lot of people have been figuring out, which is, wow, I was really busy. I was doing a lot and I was fairly exhausted. And by the time I sat down for a week and was commuting from my living room to the office, and back, I don't need a key for the bathroom anymore. I can have lunch at home. My life is much more relaxed and calm, and I've had more time to think and consider what my life has been like. And even though I wasn't really aware of it, I was moving pretty darn fast before this happened. And so I think I've learned that I would like to slow it down and be more thoughtful about how I go about scheduling myself when I get back into it. Like, I understand that it's hard not to feel like you can get everybody in. I felt that way too. But now I'm realizing I don't have to service everyone. It doesn't have to be just me. There's a whole bunch of us out there. And there's somebody out there who does have a space and can take people. And so just trying to be more thoughtful about it. Yeah.
I love that. And I completely resonate with that as I try and and slow down too. And I know a lot of us are, even though things have slowed down in some ways, are also incredibly still very busy. So um, as we look at some copings and some healing that we can do for ourselves, I know one of the things that you teach is tapping. And I'm wondering if, for people that maybe don't know what tapping is, if you could talk a little bit about what that is and maybe how it can support us while we're working long hours supporting the clients that we are seeing.
Yeah. So tapping is a thing that started to come into the forefront about in the 1980s. And it started with Roger Callahan, who was a psychologist working with a woman who had a severe water phobia. And he was studying acupuncture points at the time. And she was talking about her stomach and that she was just her stomach was so tense. And he remembered that the stomach meridian ends right here under your eye. And so he said to her, why don't you just tap on that, kind of an acupressure thing? And he just said, see what happens. Well, it completely calmed her down and worked very well for her. That was intriguing to him. So he started looking at all the different points and how they match up to different emotions and issues. And he created a thing called thought field therapy. That blossomed into emotional freedom technique and a lot of other techniques that have become quite popular. And so it began to be studied. Now it's about, let's see, I think it's had a lot of meta-analysis, and it's now considered an evidence-based therapy. So it's a wonderful technique that helps people calm traumas, anxiety, depression, reduce, problem behaviors, grief. It's all kinds of things that it works for. And I have found it to be a very calming technique and long-lasting. Once something is, worked with the tapping, it seems as though it never comes back. So that's a really wonderful, result. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so amazing and so powerful. And I love how that works. And I'm curious, would you be willing to maybe lead us through a tapping exercise today?
I can show you a little bit how it works. Of course, it's not something that you can just do off the top of your head. You need some training. I went to the Association of Comprehensive Energy Psychology. That's an international nonprofit organization that does training, and I got a diplomat in energy psychology in 2007. And I do think it's important, but I can give you a little taste of what it might feel like. If you were to just sit back and take a deep breath. So everybody just sit back and take a deep breath. And as you take that breath, think about, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 was a very shallow, 0 is a very shallow breath, 10 is a very full breath. What number would you give it? So what number would you give it that came for you when you took a deep breath?
I would give it a 7.
A 7. Okay, that's pretty good. So then what we're going to do is we're going to start tapping on the side of our hand. This is the meridian that deals with fight or flight. And so the first thing we do is we calm the system down by saying, even though, and repeat after me, even though
Even though
I have this shallow breath,
I have this shallow breath,
I can't seem to get a deep breath.
I can't seem to get a deep breath.
Even though that's happening,
Even though that's happening,
I deeply and completely
I deeply and completely
accept myself.
accept myself.
Even though
Even though
I have a hard time getting a deep breath.
I have a hard time getting a deep breath.
I deeply and completely
I deeply and completely
accept myself.
accept myself.
Now we're going to tap on different meridians around your head and torso. So we start here and we say, hard to get a deep breath.
Hard to get a deep breath.
It's hard for me to get a deep breath.
It's hard for me to get a deep breath.
Maybe I'm holding some tension.
Maybe I'm holding some tension.
I'm not sure why I can't get a deep breath.
I'm not sure why I can't get a deep breath.
Maybe I'm a little anxious.
Maybe I'm a little anxious.
Maybe I'm a little worried.
Maybe I'm a little worried.
It's hard for me to let go sometimes.
It's hard for me to let go sometimes.
It's tempting to keep my breath shallow.
It's tempting to keep my breath shallow.
And on the back of your hand in this little ridge, I have a hard time getting a deep breath.
I have a hard time getting a deep breath.
And then on the side of your thumb where the nail meets the skin, closest to your body, hard time getting a deep breath.
Hard time getting a deep breath.
And then your index finger. Struggle with a deep breath.
Struggle with a deep breath.
Middle finger, hard to get a deep breath.
Hard to get a deep breath.
And then your little finger, hard to get a nice deep breath.
Hard to get a nice deep breath.
Okay, and now take another big deep breath.
Very good. I got a much deeper breath.
And maybe some people watching this did get a big deeper breath, and maybe some people didn't. That's okay. Doesn't mean it didn't work. It just means that there's something else going on there. And the thing about tapping is that we have to figure out what all the little pieces of the pie are, because maybe you had a phone call this morning that was upsetting and that's causing you to not be able to get a big deep breath, but we would have to tap on that next. So that's how the tapping works, is going through all of these things until you finally, get everything calmed down. But hopefully people saw their number go down 2 or 3 points.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for walking us through that experience. And I will certainly put a link to where people or therapists can learn more about that and some of the evidence-based information about tapping. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, so ACEP is energypsych.org. That's where you can find them. And they're a good place to start. And they have a wide range. They don't do just tapping. They do all kinds of alternative energy modes for dealing with issues. So it can be interesting to look around, see what there is.
Yes, they do. And just to give them a little promo, their conference is going to be online this year. So it might be a little easier for people to attend. So check that out as well.
For sure. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So before we wrap up today, do you have any additional words of wisdom that you would like to share with this community?
Well, I think, it is about taking these big, deep breaths and not worrying so much about making mistakes, but just trying to make the best decision you know how to make as you're going along, because that's all we can do. There's no such thing as a right or wrong decision here. There's only making the best decision you know how to make, and if it didn't work out, then you'll fix it, and we'll just keep moving along. So that's what I would say.
Oh, lovely. Yes, we are all just doing the best that we can and muddling through.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure for me too. All right, everyone. This is Therapist Supporting Therapists. Please like and subscribe below and have a great day. Bye, everybody.
Namaste.